Because absolutely, we'll go to events and then people will come up to us and say, you know, until you two walked in, I had no idea that there were two of you.
This is your book, freshly out, just over a month.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited. I have been a huge fan of your Frida Klein series, and this is one of the first standalone novels that I've read under the Nicci French title. So tell me a little bit about where the pitch for this came from, that kind of favor to be called on later in life. Where did that come from?
Do you mean our ideas? I think they mainly come not out of reading about some crime, but just when we did, they come out of our own conversations about things we can't quite resolve. And it was really just for years. We just had this almost was an argument about if someone comes to you who you have got a real bond with, so you know, a friend, and they come and say, can you do me a favor? Do you, in a way, should you just say yes even before you know what the favor is? Do you just have to do it? And we just couldn't. We kind of kicked it around. We couldn't agree on this, and so we thought one day we were going to, you know, it almost was telling us that this is something we should make it into a story.
So actually, we carried that idea, or that very base, that thought, that idea about, is there a moral obligation? We carried that thought about the favor around with us for years and years, and we couldn't find a way to make it into a thriller. And it was only when we thought about the protagonist of the novel, Jude, and we kind of understood who she was. So Jude is, you know, we meet her very briefly at the beginning of the novel when she's 18 and involved in this passionate first love. And then we meet her again when she's nearly 30, and she's always been a good girl. She's always been on track. She's always been in control of her life, which is a very dangerous thing in a Nicci French novel, because as soon as somebody thinks they know where they're going, they're derailed. But so she, you know, so she's kind of, she's known where she's going. She's a doctor. She's got a partner, and she's going to marry him in a few months' time. They're about to buy a flat together. Everything is controlled. And then out of the past comes Liam, and he asks her for a favor. And because this is a Nicci French novel, she says yes. And because this is a Nicci French novel, that is a spectacularly bad idea. And from that one yes, from that moment of saying yes, she kind of crosses a line, and her life gradually, and then faster and faster, just speeds out of control and unravels.
Unravels is the exactly right word to use for what happens to poor Jude. I love that you, like, literally in my notes, I have written Jude equals the good girl, because that's exactly how we find her. Like I'm going to say she's a doctor, but is that actually her title? What is the right title for Jude?
She's a doctor. She's a junior doctor. She's a kind of care of the elderly doctor, and she's wanted to be a doctor since she was little. She's always known where she was going. And actually, there is, you know, when we look back on the novels we've written together, there's a kind of motif that runs through many of them, which is that people like to think that they are in charge of their lives. They like to think that's the kind of, everything is under control and that everything is kind of orderly. And actually what we think and what we do to people in our novels is that everyone is just a few steps away from disaster. Nobody isn't standing on kind of thin ice. And so that, you know, what we do with Jude is we take somebody who feels that everything is settled, and we kind of radically unsettle it for her.
Yeah, I love that. And she's the epitome of the good girl. I feel like doctor alone is one tick in the good girl column.
It's true.
But then you make her a doctor of elderly people as well. And you're like, oh, okay.
Thank you for noticing this.
Like, also patience of a saint, big tick there. Okay. Yeah. And then, so let's talk about this derailment. We've got Liam, and their relationship is special because he's not just a friend. He's kind of the one who got away, the would've, should've, could've kind of person. And I think doing a favor for that kind of person is different to doing a favour for your mum or your brother or someone?
It is.
Well, one, I think it's really important. I mean, you know, when we write a story like to take this one, it's really important that it's sort of, it's a thriller and it's exciting and you don't know what's going to happen. But also, it's really important that it's sort of grounded in some kind of real emotion. And I think one of the, I mean, I think it's been really interesting seeing how people respond to this particular book, because I think people, she is, so I mean, it's, well, I want to kind of talk about it without giving too much away or anything, but she's basically about making bad decisions. And I think often readers is part of the way of reading the book is saying, no, don't do that. And she keeps doing the thing she's not meant to do. But I think there's the kind of emotion partly behind it is, I think, don't we all have feelings of other lives we could have led? And, you know, and maybe those of us who've sort of, you know, did their homework on time and things like that, you have a little bit of thinking, oh, you know, there's something cool about the people who didn't and who were kind of reckless. And I think she's had that. So she almost gets this new chance to step back into the alternative life that she kind of rejected, but feels a bit, you know, and joining the cool people, you know.
And it is also just about the potency of first love. I mean, the kind of head over heels, suddenly kind of losing yourself in somebody else. So we wanted to summon that up. And Liam, it has to be said, is not a good boy. He's the bad boy. He's the handsome, reckless, self-destructive boy. So we wanted to kind of show how very seductive that is for somebody like Jude. And then, as Sean says, we wanted to kind of draw her into a plot that just can't let the reader go, but can't let Jude go either. She kind of gets sucked into this whole other world.
You're so right. And I think there are definitely moments of, you know, I am a Jude person. Like when you're saying homework, yes, 100%. I was the good girl, 100%. There are definitely moments that I think will resonate with lots of different people. Like you're saying, everybody's had that first love and they think that they're never going to love like that again. And then, of course, you grow up and you experience life. But some characters that potentially people won't have experienced before are people like Danny and the house, this kind of ragtag bunch of housemates that live there. How fully formed did they arrive for you? Or did you spend hours kind of spitballing it?
Hours. We spent days thinking about, well, what we wanted to have was a house that's both kind of in London, but also like something out of a fairy story. So it's almost as if Jude has kind of fallen down the rabbit hole, or stepped through the looking glass. Actually, she steps well, I'm not going to say what happened, but by kind of pursuing what it is that's gone wrong in her life, she steps into this whole other world where everybody is kind of beautiful and strange and other, where they're living lives that she had known existed. And to begin with, they're very, very charismatic. And then bit by bit, we just wanted to darken it. So what is kind of charismatic becomes menacing and sinister.
So that's such a perfect way of describing it. The Alice in Wonderland metaphor, particularly. That kind of wonder of being slightly high and then the menacing, slightly more traumatic edge of waking up with a terrible, terrible hangover that you don't know how you're going to fix.
Yeah.
So we had quite a lot of first time Nicci French readers on our campaign. And of course, the first thing that everybody is always so excited to discover in the sense is that Nicci French is not one person.
That Nicci French is one person. No, so so of course you're right, Nicci French, you know, here we are Nicci French. Also, it feels really vital for us that Nicci French is one voice, that we've created a kind of single writer. But yes, of course, here we are, Nicci Gerard and Sean French.
I think that's the thing. It feels, even though so many people know that you are two people writing under this tone of voice giant that is Nicci French, it feels like kind of publishing's best kept secret that you are actually two people. And on a really granular, mundane level, is there, like, do you ever show up to events and people will assume that Nicci, it is just you, and Sean, you must be the driver or the assistant or the editor.
Well, I mean, I think absolutely, and we do quite a lot of reader events and things. And I mean, you think actually now, the first few books we did, it didn't actually say we were two. I think
No, it didn't.
For a bit, it didn't
have
say
our
we were two
photo
people,
or
and we
a
didn't have a
photo,
photo. Yeah. And we just said something like Nicci French lives in London or something like that. But then that for ages, it's just said, the biography says that, there are two of us, and there is even a joint photograph. Well, it shows quite a lot of people read the book but don't read the author's biography. Don't look at me, because absolutely we'll go to events and then people will come up to us and say, until you two walked in, I had no idea that there were two of you, which is in a way exactly what we want. We don't want people to read the book and feel, oh, that's so clever, two people can write together, or I'm looking for where the gaps are. We want this for people to get lost in a story. And so that's why, so in a way that, that's why there's one name on the cover, because although there are two of us, we write separately while we're doing the book, but we write. I mean, the mystery. I mean, when we wrote our very first book together, we just wrote it. Then we were two journalists, and we wrote. It was just an experiment to see if the two of us could actually write a book. Didn't even have an idea of getting published. And the surprise. Certainly what took me by surprise once we got into our first book was once I put on the mask of writing as Nicci French, I was sort of freed to write in a different way. And I think we write weirdly when we write as Nicci French. When we write separate in our own books, really we have very different styles, but somehow when we write together, we do, as Nicci said before, we write as Nicci French in a style that's, I mean, again, I feel personally, I feel free to write in a way I can't write on my own.
No, it makes total sense. And I think what a testament to this confluence of energies that people are coming up to you and saying, I didn't realize that was two people.
Well, I think sometimes our worst readers are people who are like our family and friends, because they can't stop themselves thinking, oh, that sounds a bit like Nicci, or didn't that character, isn't that someone that Nicci or Sean used to know? And actually, that's so irrelevant to the way we work.
I mean, you talk about the confluence of voices. I mean, I guess at the heart of what we're kind of our project as being Nicci French is that it's not a power battle, that we have to trust each other, that when we're changing each other's words, when we're erasing each other's words and rewriting each other, then there's nothing about ego involved there. It's that we're doing it in the service of this kind of third person that we've made up between us, and that we can dare be ridiculous in front of each other or kind of fail in front of each other. And that kind of act of trust, I mean, I think in a way it's baffling that we've managed to do it. We have, when our very first book got published all those years ago, we had a few friends who tried, they kind of thought, well, if they can do it, why not us? And they did, and a couple of them did try and had a terrible arguminative.
And are they all divorced now? They're all
stopped.
They're not writers. They're not.
I mean, there was actually one couple who they had this very, very bad idea of writing an erotic thriller together.
Oh gosh.
An erotic novel together, and he was more of the writer, so her job was to come up with the ideas and then he was going to write them. And so she very reluctantly went away and came up with some ideas and told him them, and he had a blazing row about it, and he stormed off, and they never went any further than that. And because I think it is hard, that kind of laying down one's ego and one's own, the kind of, and the vanity of it, it is it's a hard thing that we're doing to each other, to be kind of continually editing each other and rewriting each other. But it's been so, for us, there has to be a payoff for that. And the payoff is, first of all, that we can kind of we've created this voice that belongs to both of us, and it's quite mysterious, but nevertheless, there it is, it belongs to both of us. And we think that voice has enabled us to write in ways that we never would have been able to write before. And it's been a kind of, for many, many years, it's been the adventure we've had together, our way of exploring the world together. You know, Sean was talking about the way that we come up with ideas. It's endless kind of what ifs, the things that we can't decide on, the things that worry us or obsess us or unsettle us. And that's what we're writing about, and that's what we've been doing together for such a long time now.
You say such a long time, many years. You're older, and every time you say it.
I love the idea that you both essentially work for NICCI FRENCH, and you're just kind of underneath this title, but slightly separated from it. Like you say, that there is that ego separation where you show up to work. And
yeah, well, I rather like that idea that it's all, you know, because you know, that it's this other, we're writing under this other figure. So she's like, although we go out, you know, it's not a secret, but somehow there's a kind of protection. Writing unlike, you know.
Actually, nobody's ever said to us that we work for NICCI FRENCH.
It's very good image.
And I'm going to remember that. That's very good. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm glad you like it. Now I suddenly got very worried that I had said the wrong thing.
I know, that's good.
Okay, good. Well, that's good. So obviously in this book, we've got Jude, who, as you've mentioned, she's your good girl. She's your very strong central character. And for me, the other really strong NICCI FRENCH central character is Frida Klein. And how did you go about, like, how does writing Jude's story feel different to writing Frida's story?
Well, it's really different.
Oh, it's so different. I mean, just in terms of thinking about the characters. So the reason that we wrote a series featuring Frida Klein actually was because of Frida Klein and her. You know, we kind of thought about who Frida was, and as soon as we were thinking about her, we knew she needed more than one book. She wasn't going to disclose herself in just one book, so we gave her 8 books. And Frida, I think, we've written a lot of standalones, and that was our only series. Frida is the only central character we've written who is like a kind of alpha female, if you like. Almost all the other protagonists we have are people like us. They're people who are kind of catapulted into the world of kind of the thriller world and are phenomenally bad at it. They're not good at being detectives. They're not cleverer than us. They're about, they're not kind of less fallible than us. Whereas Frida was somebody who was kind of scarily cleverer than us. We always loved Frida, but we worried about what she'd think of us and how she'd think of us. So that's the first thing I'd say. And then, of course, we saw Frida live through what amounted to almost like a decade of her life. So we watched time change her and experience change her and all those people around her as well. And so she was a way of kind of thinking about how life kind of bashes us about, how we get older.
And writing a series is so different because normally for example, by the time anyone's read The Favour, we're finished with the character of Jude, and so it's all done. Whereas then by the time we were writing like second and third and the continuing books in the series, readers had read them, or we'd talked to people about them, and you get a feel. You say you're writing about almost like a shared group of people, and that's great. It feels weirdly, but very, very different.
And there were many reasons why we always knew it was just going to be an 8-book series, and it was going to have a kind of beginning and an ending and a kind of overarching story. But there was one of the reasons was that we wanted Frida to remain quite mysterious. I mean, mysterious to the reader, and therefore mysterious to us a bit. We never quite got to the bottom of her, because there was a kind of profound kind of damage and kind of wisdom to her that we wanted to retain. Whereas, Jude, it has, we really like Jude as well, but she makes so many mistakes. She's just, she is enormously fallible.
Yes, yeah, you're so right. Jude is, I feel like you're kind of every woman. I feel like I am Jude. I feel like I know other Judes. Whereas Frida is this kind of enigma of trauma And like, I think the point about her intelligence is really relevant as well. But Sean, then you just mentioned the idea of having shared characters with the world, which I love. I love that because of obviously the series develops over time. Did anything happen, or did anybody who was talking to you say anything to you that changed the future of any of the Frida books as you wrote them?
I mean, one to take one really obvious example, we had in our very first book, Blue Monday, we had one character who there's a character, in fact, from Ukraine, the Ukrainian builder called Joseph, who was meant to just be a little character in the first book. And in fact, he enters the book by falling through Frida's consulting room and causing absolute havoc. And it was like, it was like inviting someone to a party who wouldn't leave. I mean, he wouldn't leave the series, and he just became more and more important because somehow. And one image we had for it is, you kind of have a party and you invite people from different parts of your life, and weird things happen. And some people just improbably really get on with each other, and it all goes well. And other people they kind of leave early because it doesn't work out. And I think that's kind of what happened in the series. So you bring in these characters, and some people like Joseph, they gel, and everyone, they want to stay and have a good time. And then other characters, it didn't, I mean, the good thing is that you certainly feel some characters serve their function. And the good thing about writing a series, which you can't do with a party, is you can kill them off. There were one or two characters you thought that's enough.
Enough of them. We can kill them.
I love Joseph, and I like his kind of, like, particularly in Blue Monday, his kind of like bumbling, he's almost his Watson character to her Sherlock. You've got this beautiful, intelligent character, and then this kind of odd assistant that's bumbling around. Well,
also one of the things that it was really, I mean, again, in a certain ways, the character of Frida developed in a different way, because the crucial thing about her, right from the beginning, she was a real loner. She didn't want to be, never wanted to be part of a team. She didn't want people to tell her what to do. But actually, again, almost this is where characters take over a bit. She sort of attracted this group of people around who kind of became her friends, And I think that was really, it was sort of interesting to sort of, it really felt like an organic thing, as if the characters took over a bit. And so she like found this group of loyal people around her who sort of became more and more important to her as the series went on. So that was, I mean, it was, and again, that wasn't, I mean, both on the level of a book and also on something like as a series, you have to plan. You're building a machine to a certain extent, but you're kind of like the other metaphor is you're like creating a garden or something. I mean, you've got to allow things to grow and sort of follow the way things develop. And that's and it's somehow being able to do both, trying to be open to both, really.
The machine.
Yeah.
Machine in the garden. Yeah.
And I feel like the question that every writer gets asked is, are you a plotter or do you write more intuitively? But it sounds like writing for Nicci French is a very careful balance of both.
I absolutely think that we spend a long time plotting, and not just plotting the plot, but thinking about the characters and the voice and why this book needs to be written and what the landscape is going to be like, what the setting. So we do spend a long time doing that. And then when we start writing, a lot of that has to just get kind of molded or even thrown away sometimes. So we have to be, let it be organic. So and I actually think that's when a book is working, when it just won't follow the plot that you've laid down for it, and when the characters won't do what you want them to do.
I mean, I say I'm always fascinated by how other writers work, because everyone is so different, which is why kind of when all advice guides are sort of, most of them are so hopeless, because you just, in a way, there are no rules, but because you have to find what works. So I mean, for example, the most extreme example of the not plotting is that I know of is Lee Child, who apparently says he literally will sit down and he won't even know what his first sentence is going to be, and then when and he just lets it carry him forward. Whereas I think for us,
well, writing together, that would be a recipe for something mad.
But I think also is the idea that for us, one of the images is like a journey that, and you have, or something, we have to know. I mean, we have a beginning, you have an idea where we're, but also where the journey's going to end is always so important. And sometimes you won't, and the main points, you don't know every bit of it, but you have to know where you're going to end up with, because that gives you, because then you can have a kind of feeling of purpose, and of course then you can play around with it. And so I'm, but again, I'm not going to sit here and say that Lee Child has made a huge mistake in writing the books he's made, because that's what he needs to do.
There are different writers who kind of lay down rules for writing, and actually they're just their rules for writing. They're the rules for themselves. I mean, no rule, the only rule you can have is a rule for yourself, and even those rules you can break.
I mean, in a way, I think one thing that's fascinating is that you've got to always find what are the books you have to write, and what is the world that your books are in. So in a way, when you think about Lee Child, it's because the kind of hero he's created, this Jack Reacher, he's like 6'9" or whatever, and makes his way through the world. Well, in a way, you can create that sort of story because he just sort of goes where he wants to go. And whereas you could say the kind of people that we write about are kind of, I mean, one of our big maxims is that the people, sometimes you feel when you read thrillers, everyone knows they're in a thriller, from the beginning. And our characters are people who they don't want to, they think they're in another kind of book.
They want to be in a romantic comedy or something,
because in a way, I think quite a few of our stories, even including the Favour, you could have, that you could have this Donne and make it a romantic comedy. Someone comes to love with this crazy Favour, and complications ensue. But we and what we're interested in is what it's like for ordinary people when suddenly and which is again something we talk about a lot in our own lives, is how would you deal with it if everything collapsed? Would you have the strength to kind of survive that, or if something really unexpected happens? My inspiration, I'm always sure that I wouldn't have the strength to deal with it. But I think a lot of our stories is about very ordinary people who often face a kind of choice at a certain point. Are you just going to give up and lie down and die, or will you see it through? That's always an interesting
and also
thing.
That I think you don't really know who you are until you've been kind of tested. I think lots of people occupy a kind of narrow band of who they are, and one of the things that happened, I mean, psychological thrillers are very wonderful elastic forms. What you can do is you can turn people inside out, so all the things you keep hidden from yourself as well, you have to suddenly kind of know and explore. So when we're doing the plotting of the plot and trying to make it really compelling, we're also doing the plotting of the character and how the character gets turned inside out, how they have to learn different parts of themselves. And there's the kind of great mystery of being human. You never get to the end of who you are.
No, I think what you've just said is so true for Jude. I think there are moments when the readers are watching Jude going, no, I know what you're going to do, but please don't do it. Like, I can see it. Don't. But not in the way where you're watching a horror movie and you know what has to happen so that the next bad thing can happen.
Yeah.
Like the decisions that Jude makes, like you say, they're based very much in realism, and like the decisions that we would all make, which I think makes it heartbreaking.
But I think also that she does, I think she loves. Well, I don't want to give away how.
Sean's a real spoiler.
I'm trying to say that she kind of learns about herself and learns important things about her. I think she. I think she's in certain ways. Her life has not been the way she wasn't living an authentic life. She was in many ways about who she was and what her life was like, and she learned some very painful. It's very painful, but she maybe learned something. Is that giving away too much?
I don't know, Sean.
I like that banter between the two of you. When you both speak, you kind of naturally hand over to each other. But
Not
you
always.
also so listen, I'm personally really interested in the kind of the craft of writing, particularly crime thriller novels. We've touched on kind of the plot and things like that, and I know that you said that there aren't any rules as such, but are there things that you think are imperative to good crime thriller writing? Like you mentioned the kind of compelling nature of things? Are there things that you think simply can't be without?
Well, there are things that I think we simply can't be without, and I guess we, you know, they're kind of, in some ways they're quite obvious. So when we talk about when we're planning the actual plot, I mean, endings are fantastically important, and sometimes we'll start with an ending because it's very easy to come up with an absolutely ingenious, compelling beginning if you don't really have a way of solving that, or if it's a damp squib. So we really try and make sure that it's not a damp squib. And then the other thing we do when we're plotting is we need to think of kind of pace and the kind of points of drama and the quieter points between, and to make sure they happen at the right times. It's almost like thinking of a kind of how music works or something. Where does it become exciting and where does it become calmer? But then there are all, and then we talked as well about, I mean, I think that character, when people talk about why they love any novel, but actually just as much crime novels, it's not just plot, it's the character. They have to care about the character. You have to remember the characters and care about them. And then the third thing I'd say, and we talk about this and we do research about this a lot, is where something is set. And every novel requires a different kind of setting. You have to, and we go there and we have to kind of explore and kind of, what does it smell like? What does the ground feel like? What's the, you know, what's, we have to know that world. So even if we don't describe it greatly, we have to know it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think readers are fantastically intelligent, and readers can tell if something's inauthentic, if you haven't had it in your imagination.
I'll just say a couple of other things, which is, I think if especially, I think it should apply in lots of kinds of fiction, but so much in the crime form, which is, I think you should almost, when you're writing, you should have like a little voice in your head of a slightly annoying reader who's constantly saying, would they really do that? Or, you know, why don't they call the police? Or, you know, and it's, I mean, the trouble is that annoying reader can then stop you writing altogether. But I think we all, you know, I mean, and in a way, and that was a particular concern writing with Jude, someone who really, I mean, in a way, the point of her is she saying, well, why is she doing that? And I think in some ways we, you know, that's part of, that was like, I mean, every character has their own thing about them. And I think part of the question with Jude is, why is she behaving the way she's doing? But I think it's really, because I think sometimes if you're it could be either reading a thriller or watching something. There's a certain, I think at the beginning of almost anything, you're going to give yourself into the world and you'll go along with it. You know, you can allow, you know, if there are a couple of coincidences or things, you'll allow that at the beginning. Mm. But at a certain point, if you think, oh, I don't believe this, I don't believe this world, then you just, you know, I mean, the reader, you know, it's one thing the reader getting irritated, but you know, if the reader just stops reading, I think that's important. And then there's a much more mundane thing. I think, again, I think it applies to lots of forms, but I think, again, particularly in the crime world, there's you need to be kind of authentic about kinds of detail. You know, if you're going to write about, you need to go and actually go and do the work. And of course, research must never kind of smother, or you don't want to just show off your research for the sake of it. But again, if you're writing about a world or writing about certain procedures or whatever, I think the reader needs to believe that this is sort of how it works, you know, and this is, you know, and there's a kind of interest in that as well. But I think it's part of, I think that all crime fiction does need to be grounded in some sort of actual, you know, you almost feel, you don't want to just feel that, you know, that I don't say if there's a poison in it, you don't want to just feel that the writers made up something called unobtainium or whatever the word is, and you know, you want to feel, you know, that yes, that you know. So those are my two rather woolly sort of rules.
No, not woolly at all. And I particularly love the research element. And I think that, you know, I am definitely one for a kind of Wikipedia rabbit hole. I end up hours later going, wait, what was I meant to be doing?
Yeah.
But I think the question here is, you've got a unique perspective on this, is that when you're writing something where somebody does need to do some research for a particular procedure or poison, to your point, does one of you go away and do the research and then explain it to the other, or do you both do it?
No, so we are, you know, people might think that it's a very efficient way of writing, is that it's kind of takes half the time. It doesn't. We do all the research we do together, even if only one of us is going to be using it. We just both be inhabiting that world. And also we never quite know who's going to be writing which bit. So we know we do the research together, and that feels important.
Also, the research can be a way of it also generates its own ideas, and that's sort of fascinating as well. So I mean the Frida Klein thing, obviously a lot of it was about walking around London, and so part of the inspiration we got was actually because everywhere Frida went, we went, and actually going to places stimulated lots of ideas for the kind of things that could happen in these weird bits of London. And then there are others. I mean, it was a book we wrote a book called House of Correction about someone who defends himself in a murder trial. And so we did we did a lot of research about just the way a British criminal case happens and all the details of the court thing. And in fact, the more we did, the more it kind of because it actually, if someone is defending themselves in the situation, and then so it all becomes very chaotic because they don't know how the rules work. So in fact, it inspired a lot of the story of just of someone running up against the incredibly rigid courtroom thing. Whereas if we just sat there and made it up based on things we watched on, in TV courtroom dramas, it wouldn't, we just lost lots of ideas.
So I think it goes back as well to what I was saying earlier about kind of needing to know the world that you're writing, having it in your imagination. There's something about writing from very shallow roots that it's a horrible, I mean, every writer must know it when they think they don't really know what they're doing, they're kind of winging it, and readers can pick up on that. You just need to be able to kind of feel what your world is, and research is part of that. So research is not just about kind of blood types or kind of bones in the body. It goes down really deep. You need to feel that, if we're writing about a particular kind of world, we've been to that world in our imaginations, and we've both been to it.
Also, of course, having done the research, you then jettison 90% of it. But as long, but you just need to have it but in fact, you don't need to show all your homework. But again, as Nicci said, I think you can tell, if people are comfortable in the world you're describing or the procedures you're describing. I think
one of the weirdest pieces of research we did was in a book where somebody had her arms tied behind her back, and we had to work out if it was possible to get out of them, but to kind of bring the arms round her body, and so I let myself get
I tied Nicci up.
I did wriggle out.
This is what we get up to in private. I regret to inform you.
I was just about to say, I've got this vision of you walking, down the Thames, across the bridges, to the outside world. You must just look like a normal couple wandering around, taking in the sights, where actually you're planning to drop the bodies. But of course, you're actually in hardware stores buying rope.
That's right.
But before I let you go, I'd love to talk to you about, Nicci, you mentioned it, the kind of efficiency of your writing. How much of it, and I'm sure you must get this question all the time, but in terms of like writers' burnout, how much of, because you obviously are a partnership inside of work and outside of work, how much of it infects is not the right word, how much of it overflows into your regular day-to-day lives? Do you find yourself cooking spaghetti bolognese?
No, so overflows is actually probably the wrong word, because there aren't those compartments to begin with. I mean, it's not a 9-to-5 job. I mean, I think for most writers, it's just not a 9-to-5 job. You can't just kind of take off your writer's hat. Many of our kind of best ideas have come kind of out of the blue when we're kind of on holiday, when we're writing a different book. Most of our ideas come out of really kind of personal things that we're talking about together and can't reach the end of. And so there's no way that the kind of our life together, I mean, it's kind of, maybe it's almost worrying. There's no, our life together as a married couple with 4 children and friends and the kind of life that we love, and our life as a kind of professional writing partner, they're just intertwined with each other.
I think most people would not be able to bear the way that we live our lives, just because I think especially I think lots of relationships really depend on having separate lives, and so you can time apart from each other and separate groups of people you're working with, and also that at times where now work has stopped and now it's time for have fun, and we have none of those things. You know, we're kind of sort
I mean,
of
we do
working
have
together.
fun.
We don't. No.
Spend some time apart from each other. We don't go around hand in hand like some cute
No,
little
it's more like shackle to hand, shackle to hand. But but I think just, I mean, but in the sense that there's a bit of us that's always saying, could that make a story, or what about that? I think, as Nicci said this earlier, and so that, you know, we're never completely off. But it's not that we're working 18 hours a day, but we're never just saying, sorry, don't talk about that now, because we're
because we always have to be. You have to be available.
You
have to be available for kind of ideas and emotions and thoughts to kind of flood into your windows. They just have to be open.
I love that, and it speaks to your absolute kind of adoration of NICCI French as well. Like, you guys are, there is a third person in your marriage, and it's NICCI French.
My adoration of Nicci.
Oh, sorry, no, I meant
you spoiled the romantic moment.
The overlord version of NICCI French.
Yeah.
I'm very fond of this new thought that we are working for this tyrannical figure.
Well, listen, I will let you go, but just one last question, and hopefully it's not too much of a tricky question. I'm always looking for books to add to my TBR. So do you have either a favorite crime thriller book to recommend, or do you have a character that you've absolutely loved that you have read that I should go away and dive into?
Well, so I'm going to recommend something that you've very probably read already, so it won't be any help, but it was one of the books that we both read actually before we met each other that was kind of an inspiration for us in a very particular way, and that's Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow.
Okay.
Which is a kind of courtroom drama mostly, and it's terrifically well written. It's big and compelling, and above all, it has got the most glorious twist at the end, which you just think, whoa, I did not see that coming. And we often kind of have that thought in our mind when we're thinking about endings. We have Presumed Innocent in our mind, and as a kind of model of how to do it.
Oh, that's great. I feel like I love a good twist.
Yeah,
it's a great
it's
twist.
it's a really good book.
And I won't say anything more.
Okay.
As you.
Well, right. I was going to say Presumed Innocence. I'm going to think of some. Do you know what about Edge of Darkness? So, right. I'm going to recommend something that is interesting. That
it's not a book, of course.
Yeah, it's not a book. Does it count if it's a TV thing? Is that all right?
Yeah. I'll let you have it.
We just watched it recently, and it's interesting that it just shows that people that will talk about inspirations, and they can come in such different forms. So Presumed Innocent is so different from anything we write, and yet it was a kind of inspiration. And this was a thriller that was done on. It was done on BBC. You can get it on DVD. If people dig it DVD or whatever, you can stream it or something. It's done by the BBC. Written by Troy Kennedy Martin. It was in the mid-80s, and it's basically it starts as a police procedural thriller. You can say in the very first episode it's about this inspector up in Yorkshire, and his daughter's murdered, and he gets involved in trying to investigate who murdered his daughter. And I for a start, I think Nicci and I agree. I think it's almost the best thing that's ever been on TV.
We watch it all.
Yeah, we've watched it several times.
Multiple times.
But also, but I think it was almost looking back, it was one of the big inspirations on our work, because it's a real, very powerful thriller. Really well, extremely well done. But also, it's very emotional. It deals with kind of grief and recovering from this terrible thing that's happened in a very serious, beautifully done way, and amazingly well acted. And it's also incredibly funny. And the idea that you can actually so it's a suspenseful thriller, very moving, and actually it's got a kind of wonderful, mad comedy running through it. So,
and also it's kind of political and social, and it's also, by the end, it's quite kind of mystical and uncanny. So it does all these different things at once. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I know what I'm doing this weekend, don't I? Like, you guys have got me sorted.
Good, that's good.
And I love the idea that you can re-watch it, even though you know what's going to happen, and even though you know what characters what going to say. Well, I love that you can re-watch it.
I reread. I say about every third or fourth book I read is a reread.
Yeah. Also, I think that's really important for thrillers. I think one of the things we really talk about when we're planning this, we always say, if someone reread it, would it make sense? Because sometimes you can sort of think, oh, this is exciting, and then you reread it and you think, hang on, that doesn't make any sense now. Now that you know who did it, why are the other characters behaving like that? You know, I mean, you've got to be very careful that the red herrings make sense once you know they didn't do the murder. It's and that kind of thing. So I think a thriller that you can't reread, or a whodunit you can't reread, is a real, you know, is a problem.
I completely agree. There is a Claire McIntosh book that has got a midpoint twist in it that I didn't see coming, but I immediately started the book again. I didn't finish it. I had to start the book again because I was like, how did I not see that coming? And of course you read it and it's there in front of you. You just didn't see it.
What book is that?
It's called I Let You Go.
Okay. I'm really interested in the whole thing of twists in books. You know, I think twists are they can be you know, you can't have a twist in every book, and it can become a sort of, you don't have to have them, but a good one in the
what's that Sarah Waters? Fingersmith by Sarah Waters.
Read that?
That's got a great twist.
That's got one of there are a few twists I remember where I thought where you just don't see it coming. You know what I'm talking about. The twist there. It's like being punched, and you suddenly think, "Oh my god!" The one I thought the Gone Girl one was good as well, but Nicci just Gone Girl. Do you remember?
Gone Girl was great, and I feel like if it didn't, I feel like what it actually did for crime thrillers, books, and films is that it brought a massive new audience.
Yeah.
Well, Gone Girl.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I do.
Like previous to that, I feel like my friends, like young female people, wouldn't have picked up a crime book. You know, crime is John Grisham, it's my dad, like that's what, but I feel like,
and that's a great point, because actually there should be no kind of walls between genres, should there? You know, every book, if it's good, it's for everyone, and there are these kind of artificial distinctions between the kind of crime and the psychological thriller.
Awesome. Well, listen, this interview has absolutely made my day. I've had a dream chatting to you.
Had such a nice time, and we finally made it. And again, just huge apologies for being so incapable before, but we're very glad we finally met you.
Very good to talk to you.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. It was wonderful to meet you.
Lovely to talk to you. Have a nice evening.
All right. Cheers then.
Bye.
See you later.